They called the police on me for standing on my own property. I let them come. I even smiled for the officer's body cam. Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd quietly requested something the HOA board never expected: an official county survey. And it was about to blow their entire case apart. Before we go any further, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your last chance. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next story only gets crazier from here. I moved into Willow Creek Estates 4 years ago. Nice houses, quiet streets, and an HOA that acted like it was running a small government. I didn't mind the rules at first: mow your lawn, don't paint your door neon pink, normal stuff. But there was one board member, I'll call her Deborah, who had a personal obsession with my side yard. Specifically, the old wooden fence separating my property from the Hendersons next door. A fence that had been there since before I even bought the house. Deborah insisted my fence was 2 feet onto common HOA landscaping easement. She said I needed to tear it down and rebuild it at my own cost, of course. I told her I'd bought the house with that fence in that exact spot, and the sale disclosures said nothing about an encroachment. She smiled that HOA board smile and said, "We'll see about that." I had no idea how right she'd end up being, just not in the way she expected. The first notice came by mail, then a second, then a notice of violation taped directly to my front door like I was some kind of criminal. Fines started small, $50 a week. Then it jumped to $200. I called the HOA management company, and they basically told me the board had reviewed the property lines and determined I was in violation. Reviewed how, exactly? No surveyor had ever stepped foot on my lawn. No official documents were shown to me. Just Deborah's word, repeated back to me through an HOA rep reading off a script. Here's the thing people don't tell you about HO. As they love throwing around terms like official survey and recorded easement, hoping you'll just cave out of confusion. Most homeowners do. They pay the fine, tear down their fence, and move on. I didn't move on. Instead, I did something Deborah clearly wasn't expecting. I called Franklin County's Land Records Office and requested an actual, legally binding boundary survey. I didn't tell the HOA. I didn't tell Deborah. I just quietly filed the paperwork and waited. What happened next is the part of this story that still makes my jaw drop. While I waited on the survey, which takes several weeks in my county, the HOA didn't slow down. If anything, they sped up. Deborah started walking past my house almost daily, taking photos of the fence like she was building a court case. The fines kept climbing. By week 3, I owed over $1,400 in violations for a fence I hadn't touched. Then came the letter that changed everything, a formal notice threatening to place a lien on my house if I didn't comply within 10 days. A lien on my home, over a fence that had been standing since the Clinton administration. I responded calmly. I told them, in writing, that I had requested an official county boundary survey and would comply with whatever the legal findings determined, not whatever Deborah believed the property line to be. Their response? They accused me of stalling and acting in bad faith. Then, Deborah did something I genuinely didn't see coming. She called the non-emergency police line and reported me for trespassing on HOA common property because I was outside, measuring my own fence with a tape measure, trying to understand the dispute myself. I remember standing there thinking, she actually wants this to escalate. She wants a confrontation. She got one, just not the one she was expecting. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights not flashing, but still enough to make every neighbor peek through their blinds. I stayed calm. I'd been documenting everything, every notice, every fine letter, every text from the HOA management company because something in my gut told me this would end up being important. The officer walked up, clearly a little confused about why he was here. Deborah had told dispatch I was trespassing on shared property and refusing to leave. I explained the situation, showed him the notices, told him about the pending county survey. He looked at Deborah, who was standing across the street with her arms crossed like she'd already won. "Ma'am," he said, "this is his property. He's not trespassing on his own land." Deborah didn't like that answer. She started arguing HOA governing documents override county boundary determinations, which, spoiler alert, is not how property law works anywhere in the United States. The officer, to his credit, just shrugged and said there was nothing criminal here. No report filed. No citation. But here's what Deborah didn't know standing there that afternoon. Confidently lecturing a police officer about property law, the survey results had come back the day before. And I hadn't told a single person in the HOA yet. I was holding the one document that would unravel everything they'd built their entire case on. Now, you'd think finding out the survey results would end the story right there. It didn't, because what the county surveyor discovered wasn't just about my fence. It exposed a mistake the HOA had been making for over a decade, affecting multiple homes on my street. And when I brought that into the next HOA meeting, the room went dead silent. The official survey confirmed what I already suspected. My fence was exactly where it should be, not 1 inch onto any HOA easement. But the real bombshell? The surveyor found that the HOA's internal property maps, the ones Deborah had been citing for years, were outdated by over a decade. Franklin County had adjusted several boundary lines back in 2011 after a road expansion project, and the HOA had never updated their records. Which meant Deborah hadn't just been wrong about my fence. She'd been wrong about at least 6 other properties on my street, all of which had received similar violation notices over the years based on the same outdated map. Some of those homeowners had actually paid fines. Some had torn down fences, sheds, even a small deck based on boundary lines that hadn't legally existed since before some of them even bought their homes. I sat with that information for a full day before deciding what to do with it. I could have just used it to clear my own name and walked away. Fence saved, fines dropped, story over. But something about watching Deborah stand in my yard, so confident, so willing to escalate to police involvement over her own mistake, I wanted the whole neighborhood to know the truth. I requested time on the agenda at the next HOA meeting. Brought printed copies of the official county survey for every board member. I laid it out calmly. No yelling. Just facts, dates, and the county seal stamped on official documents that couldn't be argued with. Deborah tried to interrupt twice. Both times, the HOA president, visibly uncomfortable, asked her to let me finish. When I mentioned the 6 other affected properties, you could feel the room shift. Neighbors who'd quietly paid fines for years started speaking up, asking questions, demanding answers. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to review all boundary-related violations issued since 2011. Deborah resigned from the board 3 weeks later. My fence never moved an inch. The fines were dropped. And 2 of my neighbors got their money back after the HOA reviewed their old violations. But the biggest win wasn't the fence, or the refund, or even watching Deborah walk out of that meeting red-faced. It was proving that sometimes the quietest move, one phone call, one official document, beats every threat an HOA throws at you. If you thought this HOA was bad, wait until you hear about the one that tried to fine a homeowner for the color of their mailbox flag. That story is even wilder, and it's coming up next.